Thought I'd seen it all before. A world of trouble knocking at my door. But this ain't like nothing that I recall.
Tell me the driving principles. Firstly, here it's the emphasis is clearly on simplification, flexibility, and being fleet of foot in a very, very fast changing situation. Let's talk about that.
Okay, Martin, I think it's very clear that the changes that are happening in the world, but talking specifically about travel retail, are obviously modifying the way that we were doing business for many years, especially a multinational company with 65 countries, with a significant level of control, but at the same time decentralization for motivating the people, obviously, to get closer to the customer. Is changing dramatically in the sense that we have to face a situation where we don't have any customers yet. The customers will come back to the business gradually. And we obviously were analyzing the situation in the sense that probably during the next 2 years, the process of decision and the fast process of decision is going to be one of the most important challenges, because customers probably will behave in a different way. Airports probably will operate the buildings and the aviation in general in a different way. And whatever is going to happen requires a flexible approach. Flexible in the sense of adaptation to the new situation, and flexible in the sense that whatever reaction in the market happens has to be obviously addressed by the company, in this case by Dufry, in the shortest period of time, from the decision regarding assortment, being specific, to decisions regarding the pricing policy, decisions regarding the promotions, decisions regarding the type of service that we are going to provide the passengers or customers, and the type of operation in each of the locations, because probably we are going to face situations differently in different places. This is flexibility. And the second one is obviously efficiency. It's not simple, but we are trying now to elaborate a way of managing the company that will limit the locations where decisions will be reached. In the sense that in the past we had an intermediate consolidation of decisions and approvals, that was the division, and now the company is going to operate directly from the headquarters to the different clusters, and as probably you read, clusters have been reduced from 23 to 7.
To 7, yeah.
This is obviously two things: is flexibility and efficiency. But behind, obviously, is the adaptation to the reality of the business, what is moving us to, obviously, the announcement that you saw this morning.
Sorry, somebody cutting across me there, Julián. I'll just turn that off. All right. Okay. So 7 clusters compared to the current 23. Now that's quite a drastic change, Julián. I guess, historically, your global scale was a great inherent defense against any downturn, because downturns in our business historically have tended to be regional. Even if we look at the very serious ones, such as SARS, they were largely regionally focused. But in this case, we have a global pandemic, and therefore that scale, that geographic diversity of yours, I wouldn't say it's been a weakness, but it's certainly not been a defense. So now, in coming from 23 to 7, you're streamlining but you're also accelerating decision making, correct?
Yeah, I think obviously to be a global company, in my view, is still a good defense, because as you may know, we have not been totally closed down. The locations we have still very close to 350 shops open. And especially is, in my view, positive during the reopening phase, because we are present today in the most important, probably, reopenings in terms of aviation locations of the world. And it's true that obviously we have been impacted like any other aviation-related businesses, but it's also real that being a global company, we are in the position to reopen more and faster than any other regional or local operation. And this is exactly, obviously, for Dufry, the most important challenge today is how and when reopen the operations. And obviously, we are going to be led by the reopening of the aviation business. As you probably already know, there are many countries and regions, and especially geographical areas, that have already scheduled a significant number of new flights for June and especially for July and August.
Yeah, you talk about this reopening phase. I totally agree, and you know that you and I spoke the other day, and I think we both concur. There's almost a pivot going on, a pivot from global closures of borders, of airlines, of whole airports, to a point of this very measured reopening. And of course, if an airport or a terminal reopens, you have to reopen with it. But it's not that easy, is it? Because while you might be taking a severe financial loss at the moment, once you start to gear up, once you start to open shops, in some ways your losses can accelerate rather than improve. Would that be a fair perception?
Yes, I think you are totally right. The reopening is probably the most difficult exercise compared with the closing. The closing obviously is done at the time that the airport is closed down because the passengers disappear or legal restrictions. But now the reopening is more adjustment. It's a management decision jointly with the airport authorities and with other landlords, because we need to grow up the reopening based in assumptions regarding obviously the expectations of passengers that will be carried on by the airlines. The exercise is difficult, but it's also obviously one of the things that probably we have learned in the past too, is how to adapt the commercial offer to the reality of the number of passengers in each of the locations. We have done a tremendous effort during this pandemic crisis to understand, how to open the business, how to reopen the business, and at the same time, how to adapt the business in each of the locations based in profitability. And obviously, this is one of the challenges, but it's already done. We have a plan for reopening in each of the locations based in the profitability generated for each of the locations, meaning that if you have 20 locations in one place, we have identified, based in the traffic flow and in the number of passengers, what could be the most efficient reopening way for each of these specific airports and or obviously travel locations.
So for a major airport, a Heathrow or any other major location that you're in, we're likely to see the focus around those most profitable units, those that attract the most foot traffic.
Exactly that. It's foot traffic based in number of passengers and how the airport is going to operate the terminals. I think the coordination with each of the landlords is basically the most important thing, because traffic flow will drive the reopening of all the specific outlets in each of the places.
All right. Now, we've talked briefly about the simplified and adapted management structure. I'll come back on that, if I may, in a moment and ask you some details. In terms of profitability, though, what about other costs? What about staff costs globally? I believe you may have had to make some decisions there. Can you talk us through those?
Yes, obviously, in the P&L, in any P&L in a travel retail company, you have three main lines. Obviously, there are other ones, but three main lines. One is concession fees, the rent we pay. The other one is personal expenses. The other one is operational expenses. The exercise of adapting the size of the company to the business in each of the obviously different time schedules of reopenings is, as I said, is one of the most difficult things. And it's also obviously elaborated in parallel with a renegotiation of the conditions with the landlords, with the airports, and also an analysis of the rest of the fixed cost structure of the company, including the operational expenses. I repeated in the market, and I think still is valid and is the target, that we are targeting this year to reduce the personal expenses by 35%. We are also targeting to reduce the operational expenses to 40%, by 40% compared in both cases to 2019. And we are also targeting that the concession fee line will be basically, especially during the time of the most important impact of the crisis, will be vital. These three areas have been part of three specific groups of people working in the company, and the consequence of their hard, very important, very hard work that they have done is very positive. And I think we are very, very close to achieve the targets in the three lines of P&L that I mentioned.
Yeah, that all, I guess, it depends on several factors. One is the speed of the recovery and the trajectory of the recovery. Now, you're right in that the world is starting to travel again, and some of your airports, I've seen them in recent days, seeing quite a number of passengers. Vancouver, a good example. But these assumptions that you're making about reduction of staff costs, concession costs will come to, Julián, staff costs, are they predicated by speed of that recovery? Are those cuts flexible according to just how quickly this thing will come back?
Yes, obviously there are assumptions behind. We are planning that the business will recover in a specific speed in specific locations, and this cost cutting is based in that. I think there are three aspects. One is obviously fixed part of personal expenses. Then you have variable parts that are also related with number of employees, for example, temporary employees. And you have also a third part that is related with the support given by the government. Because we have been, as many other institutions, supported by governments in specific countries. And I think these three blocks obviously will contribute in 2020 to the reduction of the personal expenses I commented on.
Yeah. Your job, of course, is to sustain Dufry, to protect Dufry, to in turn, in time, grow Dufry and accelerate growth as we hit into recovery. Has at any point Dufry been in danger, in your view, of not being able to survive this crisis?
Being fair, I would say no. I don't think that the company has been in danger, even obviously that the uncertainty was very high. Still the uncertainty is very high, but I am talking about last week of February, beginning of March, April, and May, where the business really was almost collapsed. But I think the company has done what in these specific situations were required. Number one, as I always said, is protect the liquidity. I think the cash, the use of the cash was restricted as much as possible. The second part was to control and reduce the fixed part of the cost structure, and we have reduced both in a way that the cash burn situation, meaning the stress cash with zero sales situation, was 75 million, when obviously in a normal circumstances is more than the double of that. And this happened in less than 30 days. What we have done in parallel is three initiatives for supporting the cash for the future. One of them was a capital increase with 150 million. The second one was a convertible bond that finally was 350 million. In both cases, we had tremendous success in the market. In the first case, we had probably 13 times oversubscription. In the second case, we had more than 8 times oversubscription. And finally, is an extension to committed lines of the non-committed lines with the banks of around 425 million. I think with the initiatives from obviously taken in the company and also the initiatives taken from the corporate point of view, we have been in the safest territory, obviously, at that time. But today the scenario is very similar. We have not burned the cash that obviously probably will destroy also the sustainability of the company. We are very focused in protecting the cash, and with this cash, the company can go through the crisis longer than I hope the crisis obviously lasts, and in any case to reach the next cash circle in the company that, as you know, because we are a seasonal company, will happen probably in May, June 2021. That's the situation. Obviously, the situation deteriorates more and is going in a different direction than the reopening that we are expecting. We will obviously reconsider where we are, but today the situation is in terms of sustainability is okay.
All right. Let's talk about some of the other stakeholders in the industry now. The brands, obviously your supply partners, are watching your situation very, very closely every day. They're anxious about payments. Mm-hmm. They're anxious about delays. They face their own pressures. Do you have a message to your supply partners?
Yes, of course. First of all, that we understand the word partnership, and we are in this process always concerned about what our partners, especially the suppliers, the brand owners of the business, will suffer too. And what we have communicated, and is in reality now, is that as soon as we have a visibility, certain visibility, not full visibility, because obviously today still the uncertainty is very high, we will contact them, and this is already done, in order to elaborate a plan for reopening and for paying, obviously, the trade payables that are standing in the balance sheet. And I think this is a good point. The second point is, as you know, in travel retail, normally the working capital is an issue because we are probably one of the few type of retail activities, putting cash on the table. Putting cash on the table means cash that is financing the inventory. And in our case, and it's information disclosure, we have more than 525 million of our own cash invested in inventory. We are not like high street retailers where most of them, or supermarket style or similar to that, they are financed by suppliers. In our case, 525 million are obviously supported by the company. And I think this combination of having the expertise in managing the net working capital in a different way, plus we understand the partnership, the real partnership, is going to really create the plan for solving whatever arguments we may have with not only suppliers but also with all trade payables during the near future.
Yeah, you'll be aware though that some suppliers at the very highest level and some big suppliers are very concerned, of course, with what's happened in this channel. Not just with Dufry, of course, but with your peer group. There's been many examples of stock being taken back. There's been many examples of very, very serious delays in payment, and that's resulted in fears at the highest level of that word that we never thought we would utter, which was default. Serious concerns held in serious quarters that some major players could default if this carried on. Now, I think you're giving the very strong message out today, Julián, that default is not on the table. The liquidity is sufficient. The recovery will be sufficient. Dufry can not only honor its obligations, but come back to a position of strength.
Yes, I think the situation is difficult, but it's under control. As I said, we have obviously enough cash in order to sustain the company for a long time. But the most important thing, we are sitting in a business that is probably the most important generating cash in the retail part, I would say, because this company generates cash very quickly. Yeah. I think the support of the suppliers is very important for us. but we are also capable, obviously, of generating cash as soon as the business is reinitiated. From the sustainability point of view, in terms of business, I think is very clear that we have been historically working with suppliers in other circumstances in order to solve problems that are related with the working capital. And I think this is the case, is we need to plan and do, and in fact, what I am telling you is happening right now. We are, structuring the near future with all the important suppliers, with all the suppliers in general, not only with important ones, in order to continue as soon as the shops are reopened in a completely normal way. Normal way means, normal payments, normal circumstances, depending on the agreement with each of the companies, of course.
All right, understood. Let's move to one of those other critical lines of expense, concession fees. Now, we've seen a number of things happen with Dufry and with all your rivals in retail and restaurant sectors and other concession sectors. Been a combination of deferred MAG, cancelled MAG, moved to variable by agreement or even sometimes by non-agreement. There have been some examples of airports saying a contract is a contract, and there have been some hybrids of this situation. How are you standing today in terms of your concession obligations with your airport partners, and critically, how do you see those evolving going forward?
I think obviously there are circumstances that are very difficult, and I think during this time of closing there is not a significant issue. The shops are closed down and we are not paying. Obviously there are always arguments with somebody, but in general terms I think the situation has been very good in terms of relationship with landlords, especially airport authorities, and we have reached conclusions that are not far from telling, please, during the time the shops are closed down, you don't pay. And that's one thing. The second part is when the shops will be reopened. And I think this is obviously a significant challenge, I would say, in terms of relationships. And I suspect, due to the negotiation processes that we have had, and also to the reality in some of the locations where we are operating today, that the adaptation of the minimum annual guarantee to the reality of the business is a fact. It's not, obviously, I cannot say 100% because it's not correct, but most of the contracts will be adapted to the reality of the business, meaning to the variability of number of passengers or variability in terms of percentage on sales.
Yeah, because the historic model simply won't work going forward not only just in the short term, but I would say in the midterm, Julián. Bain and company are predicting 2019 traffic levels to return in 2023. That's a long way down the tracks. Now, if you are saddled with historic minimum annual guarantee contracts, you're simply not going to be able to sustain them. Are you, on the basis of vastly reduced traffic levels and one would assume vastly reduced spending levels?
Yes, it's obviously the challenge here is the uncertainty, number one, because you cannot say it's 23, 22, 24. Obviously, we have three different models. In two of the models, the traffic is recovering, one in 21 at the end of the last part of 21. The second one is during the last part of 2022. The last one is the worst case scenario, is beginning of 2023. But in 2022, the traffic will be very close in our models to 2019. The problem here remains in the same, is how long and how far you can agree today with the landlords or with the airports about minimum guarantees of circumstances that are totally uncertain. And I think this is obviously the most important challenge, but I am sure about one thing. Nobody is going to be the driver in terms of the negotiation process, because or you create a sustainable business or you destroy the business. And I think this is obviously an assumption that assuming what I have seen so far during the crisis is shared by most of the landlords, in the sense, let's sit down, let's discuss what the circumstances are, and let's obviously put a plan that will maximize our income, but also will maximize the sustainability of any business model. Because here we are not discussing if we are going to breach any contract. This is not the intention at all. The idea here is to renegotiate conditions with the aim to create a sustainable business for both parts, with the maximum income for obviously for both parts, but especially in this case for the landlord. The reality is this today looks like it's going in the right direction, but I cannot say it's done because it's not done. It's an ongoing negotiation process.
Yeah, Julián, does Dufry have some of the answers to how that model should look going forward to create that sustainability? The sustainability for Dufry, of course, but the best possible win for the airport, which of course has to fund its infrastructure and is reliant heavily on non-aeronautical revenues to do that. And of course, the MAG has historically been a big part of that, hasn't it? It's underpinned, it's given certainty, particularly in the case of companies backed by big investment groups and so on. So does Dufry have some pointers to how those models, and I suspect there's not going to be one, but those models might look going forward?
Yes, we have ideas, but obviously there are not ideas that can be implemented in one single negotiation process. I suspect that obviously the most flexible for everybody is to fix whatever MAC based in the number of passengers, and I think this is a driver that is not 100% right, because obviously, as you know, depending on currencies, depending on the circumstances in each country, may impact the spend per passenger, and also the impact of the MAC per passenger can be an issue. The second one is, in my view, obvious, is we need to obviously discuss the most flexible ways to adapt the concession structure to variables, but to variables obviously based in realities that could be also even discussing, the different categories, not one single variable depending on the category, because product categories will be impacted in a different way. And the third one, that is something that we have repeated, and we have several examples today, is to create real partnerships through structures, type of joint venture, or partnerships, looking at coordination of the management of the operations through committees. That we have 2 or 3 examples, commercial committees with landlords that are really working very well, and they are producing the maximum income and the best way of allocating the capex, the investments, in the different locations. Obviously, there are multiple other aspects, but the 3 most important ones for us should be there.
All right. I'm conscious of your time, Julián, so just a few questions to close. One of the things that's coming through quite clearly here in terms of assessing how prepared companies were for something like this and how resilient they are to it is the acceleration of omnichannel activities. Dufry has put a lot of thought and investment into that part of its activities in recent times. But of course, it requires a great deal of investment at a time when investment is shackled. Will you be stepping up your focus as an omnichannel retailer going forward as a result of what you've taken out of this?
No, I don't think so. I think the opposite. We are going obviously to dedicate more and more efforts to the omnichannel strategy, with the limitations that that we are a duty-free company, and as duty-free operators, we cannot sell at home. What we do is booking and pre-booking and pre-order. But one of the most important lessons that we have learned is that in operations where we are able to sell via omnichannel. The sales were tremendously impacted, fine, but they were sustainable. And they were there, and we were able, during a certain period of time, to sell merchandise with a significant level of penetration, I would say, compared with the number of people contacted. But again, it's limited to legal restrictions. There are, in most of the countries, the omni-channel, especially online, could only be used for booking in advance or for pre-ordering merchandise.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I want to move on to your management level, focused on three main areas. We had a couple of calls today just asking us to clarify, so I'm going to pass those questions on to you. The buying side of things, Julián, would that fall under Andrea Ballardini?
Yes, Andrea Ballardini will be what I define as the owner of the commercial model. In sense, Dufry's commercial model is protected by this department, by this area, the commercial area, and especially the most important things, relationship with suppliers, marketing, digital marketing, and supply chain. And the platforms that are obviously communicating the commercial policies to the different clusters worldwide.
Right, okay, understood. Julián, as a CEO, the decisions you have to make at times like this are tough. I run a small company, you run a big one, but it doesn't matter if you're affecting one life or 1,000 lives or more lives. They're tough decisions, aren't they? Tough burden on your shoulders at the moment, having to make tough human resource decisions. How do you feel about all that from a personal and professional point of view?
Well, I feel in such a way, first of all, very, very concerned, and secondly, very frustrated. Concerned because these decisions are probably in the history of any professional career, I think, are the most difficult ones. But sometimes you take these decisions because there is a reason, or because there is an important, obviously, aspect of what happened in the relationships that should be solved. In this case, it's very tough because it's obviously affecting people that are good, professional, and they deserve to continue in the companies. And I'm talking in general terms. No?
Yeah.
This is probably the most difficult thing in terms of concern. In terms of frustration, is because the uncertainty is too high, and you cannot really predict if this is going to obviously gradually open in 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, or 3 years. And this is the uncertainty in business is something obviously in parallel. You are always living with uncertainty. In this case, the uncertainty is very special because the evolution of what is going to happen depends on something that even governments or even politicians or even whatever institution you think could control. It's totally under control. There are no aspects that can be impacted or influenced in order to modify that. And this is a bit, from my personal point of view, is the first time, and I feel this frustration of, what is going to happen, when, how long will it take. The only thing you can do is prepare the company in the way that is planned, and I explained before. Obviously, there are other ways, and probably are all right. But in terms of the experience we had back in 2008, that probably was a significant level of crisis too. Not like today, it's different, but we learn a lot of things. And what we learn is what I explained before. And I think today we can say that we are, in a good situation, obviously conditioned to the circumstances, compared with what the situation could be in a different approach. And I am totally confident that this business, travel retail, is very resilient. Not only travel retail, also aviation, also tourism, also accommodation. Why? Because it's part of the way we live. And I don't believe that the world is going to change. I don't think so. The world wants a normality that is the normality we own. It's not the normality that everybody's talking about. The normality for certain time will be impacted, for sure. But this normality is not normality. This is an extra normality. The normality that we are deserving is the normality we used to have and that we deserve. And this is going to happen very soon because we are human beings, and very soon the people will travel again, and very soon the people will obviously fly again.
Yeah, you will remember telling me a few years ago, we were in Greece and we were talking about the terrible things that were happening to the Greek economy and how your business was badly affected there. And you told me very wisely that the beauty of Greece will never go away. The desire to travel to Greece, the warmth of the Greek people would never go away. And therefore the fundamentals that underpin your business, the travel retail business, would always be there. And I believe you're right in what you just said. The desire to travel and the need to travel, they have not been taken away. In fact, one could argue they have been heightened. Certainly the desire to travel. We see it in TV programs, ratings soaring through the roof for travel programs and cooking programs, don't we? So those fundamentals remain. We just have to deal with this abnormality of this health trauma. That being said, this is the ultimate test of resilience, unquestionably, Julián. So to wrap up your announcement today, your streamlining of the organization, I just want to close with two questions in one. Are we seeing a new Dufry philosophy going forward? And what's your concluding message to the industry out there? You're being listened to sometime today by airports, by brands, by other retailers for that matter, by your staff, and probably by the investment community. What's your message about how the good ship Dufry will sail in the future?
Mm-hmm. Well, from my side, it's very important to communicate one thing. Okay, Dufry is a good partner with landlords, with airports, and partnership, as I used to say, is not only a word, it's an action. It's an action plan. And in these circumstances, when the situation is very tough and it's very difficult for everybody, we need to really show up what partnership is about. And I promise one thing, Dufry is going to obviously be the best partner possible within circumstances, number one. Number two is we need to adapt the companies and the relationships almost temporarily to the circumstances, and we need to adapt this very quickly. It's not something that can be negotiated during 3 months, 4 months, or 6 months. The adaptation of the relationships in the business today within the different stakeholders requires a very fast modification. And with the time, we are obviously in a business. Business is alive, and every time we need to behave in a different way. Today, speed requires obviously a lot of way of thinking in order to be very efficient. But again, to say something here is very easy. The problem is always the same thing: how to become the ideas in realities, and this required specific action plans for modifying the reality. And this is the only thing. Let's try very, very hard and see if we all together can go through. Yeah.
Well, I wish you well in that next stage of a difficult journey. Julián, you are the bellwether of the industry, and therefore how Dufry fares affects everybody in our sector, and I think everybody would wish you well in the days, months ahead, and let's hope you're right, and this recovery comes. It won't come fast, but it'll come, and better days lie ahead. So thanks for taking the time out to talk to me, Julián. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Martin, for your time and obviously the kind and straight questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Julián.
And I swear one day we're gonna put this out behind us, and come what may, we will survive. I think it's safe to say that better times are till this trouble is gone.